Hey, you're one of those guys who believes, that 9/11, that you don't believe 2 planes knocked down 3 buildings, right?
Well, I believed it when it happened, and then after I got out of office, my son kept badgering me to pay attention to these things on the Internet, and I finally did, and I started studying it, and I started opening my eyes a little. And there's a lot of very difficult questions that have not been answered, and no one seems to want to provide an answer.
What's the most difficult question that you see?
Well, that a third building could fall into its own footprint 5 hours later, having not been struck by much of anything.
So what do you think happened?
Stories high. How did that happen? The 9/11 Commission didn't even address the issue.
So what do you think happened?
I hate to fear what could have happened, that possibly we did it to ourselves.
You're kidding me.
Well, Howard, I worked in demolition and was trained by the best guys in the United States Navy, being a frogman. And how could those buildings fall at the rate of gravity?
Well, let me ask you something. It seems to me, I don't know much about this, but when jets go right into a building, couldn't there be so much trauma to the area that things can fall?
Yeah, no, because if you study how they built the buildings, those buildings were made to withstand a 707, which is that old plane with the 4 engines on the wing.
Right.
Well, that's as big as what hit it. And by my studying, they said it was built to where if a plane penetrated it, it would be like a pencil going through a screen door.
But it seems unthinkable to me that our own government, this would be...
Nothing's unthinkable.
You're
talking about power. You're talking about foreign policy changing over this event. You're talking about getting control of the Middle Eastern oil.
You think Bush is smart enough to pull off something like that?
Oh, please.
I don't know if he is, but I certainly think there are people capable of doing it.
But,
I'm not saying that it didn't happen. All I'm saying is that take jet fuel, for example. It's kerosene. Kerosene doesn't burn very hot. They're telling us that a kerosene-based fuel melted these steel concrete girders in a giant building so it would simply collapse to the ground.
Jeez.
And it collapsed in all powder. Wouldn't it come down in big chunks?
The thing is the fire caused the columns to weaken and the sagging floors is what caused the building to implode.
Okay, if that's the case, if you use that analogy, then when you go camping and use a propane stove, which propane burns hotter than kerosene does, if you leave it on for 2 hours and you put a big can of beans on your grill, shouldn't the grill collapse?
See that, Fred?
Shouldn't the metal weaken to the point where the weight of the beans on the grill...
It's not that much weight and it's not that much heat.
It doesn't happen.
I don't eat beans.
Well, the point I'm saying is these buildings would not collapse in that manner.
Gee, I mean...
what are the beams
that's crazy. This is crazy.
Like, even when you say that the planes were made to go through a certain way, you've never seen anything that was built to work a certain way, but you never know until something happens?
Well, there is also in the report that they did not build the...
When you question it, you're attacked.
Yeah, but they didn't build the buildings to code. They scrimped and they didn't do everything that they're supposed to do.
Look at the history of the buildings. These 2 buildings were white elephants. They were losing money. They had asbestos in there, and they were being required by law to do over $1 billion worth of asbestos removal.
So you think somebody might have sabotaged?
Just for that, they knocked it?
It was an insurance job?
Summer insured them against terrorism attacks and made $7 billion, of which he settled for 4.
I might have to read your book.
You might have to.
It's called Don't Start the Revolution Without Me. It's in stores now. By Jesse Ventura, Governor Jesse Ventura. And you even believe, you're one of those guys, you don't even believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in the Kennedy assassination.
No, I do not, because I've studied it for over 20 years. I've gone to Dealey Plaza. When I was wrestling, I flew a lot on planes, and I would read about it. And anyone that reads or studies the Kennedy assassination comes to a clear conclusion that there was not a lone gunman that did that operation.
How old were you the first time you got laid?
What's that, Howard?
I say, how old were you the first time you got laid?
16, and on that note, I think I got to get going because I got to stay on schedule and I got to...
Schedule? What kind of schedule do you have? You're in Mexico, for God's sake.
No, I'm not. I'm in Minnesota, and you guys were late getting me on, and they got a whole day's schedule.
Again? I'm always
late. Can we talk
with you.
again, Howard?
Yeah. Why don't you come in here?
Well, I was out in New York a while ago, but I'll tell you what, why don't you call me back
all right.
time, and we'll talk again when we have more time.
Yeah, you're a good guest. Governor Jesse Ventura's book, Don't Start the Revolution Without Me, in stores now. I got to get into your whole sex life, You know, have you ever done anal? I mean, I got to get into the whole thing.
Howard, I'm a frog man. I've done everything.
You've done it all. All right.
There we go.
Well, you're a great guest.
But you guys have a great day. I got to run.
And thank you, Governor.
Oh, thank you, Howard. I appreciate it. We finally touched base.
You bet. I'm glad we have after all these years.
Me too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Governor. All right.